Here's an in-depth tutorial of all of the functionality regarding the knobs in FL Studio Fruity Reverb 2. A lot of these concepts should translate over to any of the other reverbs that you might use as well. This dry fader is the only thing that will affect the dry signal. I'm going to leave it down just so you guys can hear the wet effects. So this is the default sound. So when you enable the low cut and bring it up, there's going to be less and less of the lower frequencies, as you would expect with any EQ. You could see on the top left the amount at which the low cut will be applied. So if it's set to 1500 Hertz, then anything below that will be removed. And this only goes up to 3000 Hertz, so if you wanted even more of EQ versatility, then you'd have to apply another EQ before the chain. And this would only really work if it was sidechained to another track. So be sure to check out my previous video where I explained sidechaining, delay, and reverb. And the next is literally just the opposite. So a high cut, when you enable this, any frequencies that are above what's in the box in the left corner will be removed. Next, we have the pre-delay. So I'd recommend to really just try to use the tempo. This basically snaps the pre-delay to your beats per minute or tempo. And when you have it set to tempo, you want to try to align it with the dots. And this will set it to an exact like 1/4 or 1/8. And the further up you put it, the longer the delay is going to be between the dry signal and the wet signal. So if you hear the dry signal in correspondence to the wet signal, you'll hear a delay. And the lower you set it, the less apparent it is. So if you imagine putting a microphone in the middle of like a hall or a big room, this is kind of like a visual representation of what it would sound like if it was in that room. So diffusion is basically how much space is in between each reflection. And the more you have, obviously, the less space you'll have in between each reflection. So it'll sound like one sound instead of multiple. Modulation will help to add variation and kind of change the sound as it progresses. Modulation is also kind of like a macro knob to a few other effects that could include chorus, flanger, phaser, and this knob is the speed of the modulation. This is the bass multiplier, so the higher you have this, the more bass you'll have, and it kind of gives it a more realistic and emotional effect. And this controls where the bass will be affected. And this kind of affects the higher frequencies as well, similar to the high cut. So the more you apply this, the more the higher frequencies will be noticeable. Turning the stereo separation knob to the left will make it more wide and stereo, and putting it towards the middle will bring it to the center and make it more mono. And then you could choose the side, which will put it to the side, or the mid for the mono signals, and you keep it in the middle. And then I also recommend checking out the presets. They have some pretty decent ones here. So if you want to manipulate those and make them your own, go for it. Drop a like and follow for more.